Hello everyone. After just one night, the situation continues to change dramatically. Not only does Trump want to withdraw from the Iran war, but he also wants to pull out of NATO. As for the UAE, it's the opposite. Not only do they want to join the war, but they also want to participate in ground operations. Meanwhile, the two major factions within Iran remain divided, with one playing the good cop and the other the bad cop. One faction is loudly proclaiming their willingness to cease fire, while the other continues to fiercely attack targets belonging to major Gulf tech companies. The first giant to be hit was Amazon. As for China's political situation, Wen Jiabao made a high-profile public appearance, stealing the spotlight from Xi Jinping. So, after overshadowing Xi Jinping, what happens next? Suddenly, a very shocking rumor started circulating, claiming that Wen Jiabao was going to reorganize the Chinese Communist Party. There was also a sensational rumor about Zhang Yuxia, saying that he had already been internally reported, right? The official documents have already been issued. The charge against him is treason and colluding with the enemy. You can see that these are actually two completely opposite revelations. So which one is actually true? Today is April 1st, Eastern Time in the US. First of all, I wish everyone a happy April Fool's Day. But our news is definitely not meant to fool anyone. This is all real, not just for entertainment or for a laugh. It's actually to discuss with everyone how to avoid being fooled by the CCP or by Iran. I'm Tang Jinyuan. Welcome to Jinyuan Speaks. I also warmly invite you to subscribe to our channel. Just joking, but if you subscribe to us, while we can't guarantee you'll never be misled by fake news, at least it will greatly reduce your chances of being fooled. All right, first let's discuss the most talked about issue, Trump and Iran. Is he going to leave or stay? Or is it that he actually wants to leave or actually wants to stay, right? Based on information from various sources, I think Trump's plan is basically already set. He is very likely to leave, and he won't delay for too long. He himself has clearly stated multiple times that he might stay for at most another 2 to 3 weeks, but before he leaves, he has two major options. Either before he leaves, he reaches an agreement with Iran using a ceasefire in exchange for reopening the Strait, returning to the pre-war state of free navigation through the Strait, or Trump continues bombing for another 2 to 3 weeks until Iran is bombed back to the Stone Age. In that case, whether or not there is an agreement doesn't matter to him anymore. He'll just turn around and leave, waving his sleeve without taking a single cloud with him. Of course, Trump could leave in a very carefree manner, but I think in reality it's probably not that simple, because if he wants to leave, the first ones to panic would be those Gulf countries. Because just today, Trump came out and posted, first making it clear that the Iranian government is pleading with him to reach a ceasefire agreement. However, he said he would only consider it after the Strait is reopened. Before that, he would bomb Iran back to the Stone Age. Those were his exact words. And yesterday, as we all saw, the White House spokesperson, Levitt, right, not only officially announced that President Trump would deliver an important national address about the Iran war at 9 p.m. tonight. Of course, if you look at this move, it's clearly not just Trump posting something on social media to vent or take a jab at someone, right? This isn't that kind of thing. It should be a very serious and official matter. So at the very least, this tells us that Trump has already made up his mind about the Iran war and has made a rather significant decision. It's very likely that in his speech tonight, he will publicly announce that the US-Israeli coalition has already achieved its established strategic objectives and is now preparing for a ceasefire and troop withdrawal. So after you finish watching my live stream today, you can immediately go and see what exactly Trump will say in his speech tonight. So today, actually, even American media outlets like ACT Shells have cited multiple sources revealing that the US and Iran are privately discussing a potential agreement. The core issue is that the US and Israel would agree to a ceasefire in exchange for Iran reopening the Strait of Hormuz. As for the bold sources, they did not reveal whether these discussions are being conducted directly or only indirectly through intermediaries. But that's actually not the most important point, right? What is more important is the background we mentioned yesterday about China and Pakistan. Well, those two are like brothers, right? They jointly put forward a 5-point proposal. Yesterday, I mentioned to everyone that the core of this 5-point proposal is essentially a ceasefire in exchange for the Strait. And an objective fact is that after China and Pakistan put forward this proposal, even though it came from China, the United States, rather unusually, did not publicly express opposition. But here, it involves a very crucial concept that we must discuss and clarify with everyone, which is the definition of restoring navigation in the Strait. This phrase itself is a vague concept. What does it actually mean? If the Strait is restored to its previous status as international waters, then it would be open to free navigation, right? But in reality, the Strait actually belongs to Iran, and now Iran requires you to pay a passage fee before you can pass through. These are two completely different concepts, two separate things, right? So to put it simply, there are actually three possible futures for the Strait of Hormuz. The first possibility is what we just mentioned. Trump said that the U.S. might reach an agreement with Iran, and the U.S. and Israel would cease hostilities and call a truce. At the same time, Iran would unconditionally restore free navigation through the strait, returning it to the pre-war state. This would be a relatively good outcome, but to be objective, I personally think the likelihood of this happening is relatively low. The second possibility is that the negotiations ultimately fail. Then, the US and Israel go on another bombing spree for 3 weeks, really bombing them back to the 17th century, and Trump turns around and leaves in style. He just walks away. So when Iran is severely weakened, the European countries and Asian countries, all of whom need to use the strait, finally muster up the courage, seeing that Iran can't really do anything anymore, right? They'll just send their own warships to escort their ships. This fulfills Trump's idea of go get your own oil, that kind of approach. Of course, the strait could also remain in a state of free navigation, but it would require the relevant countries to pay a price for a period of time. They'd have to send their own warships for escort, which comes with its own costs. Naturally, these costs would be borne by the Eurasian countries themselves, and the US would no longer be the one footing the bill for everyone else. Now, moving on to the third scenario, which can be said to be the single most frustrating and complex situation of them all. But to be completely objective, I personally think it might actually be the most probable and realistic outcome that we might face. Trump initiates a series of strikes and subsequently withdraws from the region. And then leaders like Macron, filled with deep anxiety and extreme caution, are forced to go and negotiate directly with the Iranian authorities. What would these negotiations be about? The most likely outcome is that Iran would, in effect, permanently control this strait and would require all countries to pay a fee before buying oil. Only then would they feel secure. It would turn into this kind of model, essentially permanently changing the nature of the strait. This could be said to be the worst possible outcome, but I think its likelihood is actually relatively high, right? Of course, as for these three possible outcomes, I know that everyone probably has their own opinions. Which one do you think is the most likely? It's very simple. Just reply to us with the Arabic numeral 1, 2, or 3. If you think it's the first one, just reply with a 1, right? If you think it's the third one, just reply with a 3. That's all you need to do. Of course, now that Trump wants to withdraw and leave, there's no doubt that Israel isn't exactly happy about it, but I think Israel isn't really in a position to say anything publicly. Basically, they'll probably still have to cooperate with Trump. On the other hand, as we just mentioned, the Gulf countries are actually the most anxious. According to the latest media reports, Trump spoke today with the Saudi Crown Prince Salman. Today, the latest phone call, what did they talk about? They discussed the Iran war. Moreover, it said that Trump briefly informed Salman about the progress of possible ceasefire negotiations with Iran, and so on. Of course, this is essentially to keep Saudi Arabia in the loop and to reassure them, because as we've shared with everyone before, right? Saudi Arabia has always been quietly urging Trump not to give up halfway, to keep fighting, right? To fight until the regime is completely destroyed, or at least until it is replaced. And there is another Gulf country, the UAE, whose stance is even more resolute. Because just today, the Wall Street Journal released another exclusive report, quoting sources from officials in Arab countries. According to the report, the UAE is preparing to officially enter the war. They plan to help the United States and other allies use military force to open up the Strait of Hormuz. Furthermore, this move would make the UAE the first Persian Gulf country to become a combatant after suffering attacks from Iran. However, this source also revealed that the UAE is currently making great efforts to lobby the United Nations Security Council. They are seeking to pass a resolution that would authorize Gulf countries, through the Security Council, to allow the UAE to take such actions. In other words, to directly join the war. Moreover, it is said that Emirati diplomats have already proposed to the United States, as well as some major military powers in Europe and Asia, that everyone should form an alliance to use force to open up the Strait of Hormuz. In addition, Emirati officials have directly stated that their country has already assessed and reviewed its own capability to help maintain the security of the strait. They believe that the UAE itself can provide services such as minesweeping as well as other types of support, and that they do have this capability. Of course, the implication is that although they can't play the leading role, they can still act as a supporting player and join in the charge alongside others. Of course, aside from this, why is the UAE so eager to join the battle and even push for this ground war? There's another major reason, which we've mentioned before. In the middle of the strait, there are 3 islands, right? They're called Abu Musa Island, Greater Tunba Island, and Lesser Tunba Island. These 3 islands are collectively known as the 3 islands of the strait. The location of these 3 islands is extremely critical. They just happen to control the central waterway of the strait, right at a choke point. So this position is extremely important. Back in the day, there was always a sovereignty dispute over these three islands, with the UAE and Iran fiercely contesting them. However, these three islands came under Iran's actual control in 1971, and now more than half a century has passed. Over the years, the UAE has repeatedly lodged protests with the United Nations Security Council, as well as with the Arab League, demanding the restoration of its sovereignty over these three islands, and consistently labeling Iran's actions as aggression, among other things. This time, it might be the best historical opportunity for the UAE to reclaim the three islands in the Strait. So, as you can see, among all the Gulf countries, the UAE stands out. It is the most determined and proactive in urging the United States to launch a ground offensive to seize the islands. So, looking at it from this perspective, I really think that in the future, the situation in the Strait still cannot rule out the possibility of the US military launching a ground offensive. Why do I say this? Because if the Gulf countries are truly willing to participate in the war, then the situation changes. Think about it. For the US military, all they need to do is seize the islands, and the task of defending them can be completely handed over to the UAE. The UAE would definitely do whatever it takes to hold on to these three islands in the Strait, because they see them as their own territory. After all, it wasn't easy. They were occupied by others for more than 50 years, and now that they've finally gotten them back, of course they'll fight desperately to keep them. In other words, the US military could help ensure the passage through the Strait, right? They could fight a ground war and take over these islands, but at the same time, they could avoid having to station US troops there long term, which could result in higher casualties and make them a constant target for attacks, right? So this kind of risk can be avoided. That's why I think this is actually a relatively feasible plan. Of course, if you agree with my point of view, please go ahead and subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Of course, as for whether Trump will adopt this plan, I think it's possible because right now, my impression is that Trump hasn't completely ruled it out by saying, I won't fight a ground war, nor has he made a firm decision by saying, I definitely will fight a ground war. In any case, that's the situation on the ground. The soldiers are still being deployed continuously. This is still ongoing and hasn't been interrupted, so Trump hasn't ruled out any options, but right now he might also be observing how the situation develops, including, as we just mentioned, the attitudes of the Gulf countries, whether they can take substantive actions to provide support and so on. If the US military can seize the island but doesn't need to hold it, then for Trump, the risk, specifically the risk of casualties, would be extremely low. In that case, I really wouldn't rule out the possibility that he might actually launch a ground war, right? Maybe within the next 2 or 3 weeks. As for Iran's stance, well, you could say that the divisions are still ongoing. Just today, Iran's president, for the first time in a very rare move, issued an open letter addressed to all the American people, not to Trump, but to the American people. The letter is quite long, and its main point is to claim that Iran has never harbored hostility toward the American people. It also says that Iran is very resilient and not something you can easily deal with, and so on. But after reading the entire letter, I think it mainly gives you two impressions. First, it clearly shows a desire to ease tensions, at least to express goodwill toward the American people. Second, it uses this approach to stir up the emotions of the American public, you see. You, the American people, are all very friendly. It's just your president who's not so good, right? You should all oppose him. I think that's actually the implication here. This is the attitude shown by the Iranian government. But almost at the same time, you can see that the Revolutionary Guard also immediately made a public statement saying that in light of the absurd actions of the American president, the Strait of Hormuz will absolutely not be opened. So as you can see, this is basically a chaotic situation. Moreover, just today, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard actually launched missile attacks, specifically targeting several of Amazon's data centers in Kuwait. Their service centers were indeed hit, but it seems the damage was not particularly severe. However, as I mentioned to everyone yesterday, the Revolutionary Guard had already issued threats, saying that a series of major American companies, their branches or data centers set up in Gulf countries and so on, are all targets for attack. In other words, the Revolutionary Guard is still continuously expanding its attacks on these civilian targets and infrastructure. They still want to escalate this matter further, but objectively speaking, what has indeed formed in the entire Gulf region now is that Iran as a whole, you can sense there are two factions, one playing the good cop, the other playing the bad cop. In reality, there is a genuine internal split among them. But objectively, this is the effect that has been created. For Trump, he says things like, I want to bomb you back to the Stone Age, right? Even if there is no agreement, this could be in response to the kind of rampant provocations from the Revolutionary Guard. That should also be related. As I just mentioned, you can see that this is actually a chaotic situation. Iran itself is already quite unstable internally, and the entire strait is also in a state of disorder. So relatively speaking, I think Trump, after striking and weakening Iran's military power to the greatest extent, would then withdraw his troops and leave. In my view, this is currently the most likely scenario. Now, another major focus of today's rapidly changing events is that the United States might withdraw from NATO. We've even put this in our headline today. This is truly a shocking and significant event. So, what exactly is going on here? Let's pause for a moment and move into today's sponsored segment. I'd like to recommend to everyone the Jeju Island Red Sea Cucumber Health Gel from Korea, which often sells out. This Red Sea cucumber is made from wild Red Sea cucumbers that are hand-harvested by generations of local divers on Jeju Island, Korea. Because it is rich in many growth factors, it is very effective in repairing various types of bodily damage. The repurchase rate is also especially high, and since it is wild-caught, the supply is limited, which is why it often sells out. Let me share with you the experience of a woman. She said that her 88-year-old father back in China suffered from severe discomfort and pain in his knee joints, which made it difficult for him to move around and required him to use a wheelchair. Then, after watching our program, she thought she would give it a try and bought the Red Sea cucumber supplement to take back to China. After some time, her father actually gave her feedback saying that the comfort in his joints had significantly improved. He was already able to move independently and his mobility had greatly increased. She was extremely surprised and delighted. There was also a lawyer named Song from Miami who had long suffered from high blood pressure, and he gave us feedback as well. After taking the Red Sea cucumber supplement for a period of time, he felt that during the day he no longer experienced dizziness, and at night his sleep quality had greatly improved. Of course, these are all personal experiences shared with us by friends, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that everyone will have the same results. Precisely because our stock is limited, we are now launching a special double gift promotional offer for those who sign up for a fixed monthly purchase. What does this mean? As long as you commit to purchasing a box of 60 Red Sea cucumbers either monthly or every 2 months, you will receive a free pack of Shenhuang Bisheng tablets. If you buy the smaller box with 30 pieces, you will also receive the same gift. Plus, you'll get a tube of Korean Repair sunscreen. In addition, during this promotional period, anyone who signs up for a monthly subscription will also receive an extra $10 voucher for Shenhuang products. For our friends in mainland China, there is an exclusive special offer. As long as you purchase a box of 60 Red Sea cucumbers, not only will you receive a pack of Shenhuang Bisheng tablets, but you will also get one original honey black sea cucumber from Lulianshen as an extra gift. Additionally, you'll also get a $10 voucher for daily essentials. The more you buy, the more you get. Of course, if you don't want to subscribe regularly and just want to make a one-time or occasional purchase to try it out, that's totally fine. Just remember to enter my promo code TJY when you make a single purchase, and you can still enjoy a 15% discount. The only thing is, I can't absolutely guarantee that there will always be stock available at all times, right? All right, thank you all for your support. Now, let's get back to the explosive news we mentioned earlier about withdrawing from NATO. Actually, this issue came up because today, during an exclusive interview with Reuters, President Trump once again made it clear that the United States will be ready to go to war with Iran very soon. He said that Iran has already lost its nuclear weapons capability, and if necessary, the U.S. can always return to carry out targeted strikes. Then, based on the details provided in the official report, acting as a mediator, an informed source representing the Pakistani side stated that yesterday, U.S. Vice President Vance actually engaged in a series of discussions with various intermediaries from Pakistan. He said that, under Trump's instructions, Vance privately expressed a position. As long as certain U.S. demands are met, including reopening the Strait of Hormuz, Trump could consider a ceasefire. You can see that this information is consistent with what Trump himself has publicly released, like the posts he wrote, right? Meanwhile, here comes the key point. The report also quoted White House officials as saying that Trump is expected to... In his speech at 9 p.m. tonight, he will reiterate his timeline for ending the Iran war within 2 to 3 weeks. At the same time, he will also express his disdain for NATO in the speech. He really used that word. The report used that exact word. It also said that Trump is absolutely considering having the United States withdraw from NATO. Obviously, this is not just a whim of Trump's, right? Everyone has seen NATO's performance this time because, well, U.S. Secretary of State Rubio, when he was interviewed exclusively by Fox News today, he said almost the same thing. He said that Iran wants to become the next North Korea and that the end of the Iran war is already in sight. Then Rubio, he also lashed out at NATO. He said, "For decades, we have invested hundreds of billions of dollars and stationed U.S. troops to defend Europe. But when America needed them, not even to participate in airstrikes, just to use the overseas bases of their member countries, we were actually refused." He said, "So why should we stay in NATO?" Of course, that's Rubio. What he said is actually very reasonable, right? From another perspective, some friends who are more familiar with US law might know that even Trump himself doesn't have the authority to just make a decision on his own and announce that we're immediately withdrawing from NATO. Because according to the 2024 National Defense Authorization Act passed by the US Congress, specifically Section 1250A, this provision is actually found in Title 22 of the United States Code. According to this clause, it strictly prohibits the president from, without the consent of Congress, suspending, terminating, repealing, or withdrawing from the North Atlantic Treaty. In other words, the authority to withdraw from NATO actually lies with Congress, not with the president. But why can Trump still say things like this? Say that we want to withdraw from NATO. I think what he actually means is that we can effectively withdraw. To put it in a way everyone is familiar with, it's not actually withdrawing, but it's as good as withdrawing. In other words, Trump could drastically reduce the scale of US military bases stationed in Europe. For example, if there were originally 10 bases, we could cut it down to just 1 or 2, right? Or say a base that used to have several hundred troops stationed there, now we could just leave 3 or 5 people there symbolically just to show a presence. At the same time, he could also drastically cut funding to NATO. As everyone knows, NATO's budget, the United States alone accounts for 70%. Such a large proportion, right? So if I slash it and only pay 20%, that should be enough, right? The remaining 50% you all can split among yourselves. More importantly, Trump might even stop supporting Ukraine as a form of selfish retaliation against these NATO allies. Because in Trump's view, since NATO found an excuse regarding the Iran war, saying, "This isn't our war," and refused to provide any assistance, not even allowing planes to fly over their airspace or letting bases be used, he sees no reason to continue supporting them. So Trump can just as well see the Russia-Ukraine war as "this isn't our war, so I won't support you anymore," right? So just think about it. If the United States really does stop aiding Ukraine, then all the assistance Ukraine needs, whether economic, military, or intelligence, would have to be shouldered by Europe alone. In other words, for these European countries, these NATO countries, the costs and sacrifices they may have to make in the future could far exceed by many times the cost of sending a few minesweepers to support Trump's operation in that strait. It could be so many times greater that you can't even compare them. There's just no way to make a comparison. That's why I keep telling everyone that these far-left governments in the UK, France, and Germany are really being too short-sighted, and this is exactly the reason why.